everybody. It's me, Ken Heckenlively, with Twice as Lively. In today's episode, I am going to be reviewing the new movie, Young Washington. Has Angel Studios finally crossed the quality barrier? And can they duke it out with the big boys of Hollywood? We'll get into that. But first, before we begin, as always, we love to do our simultaneous sip. Yes, our dear fallen leader, Scott Adams, taught us that we always want to create a special bond with you, the audience. And we do that by doing something physically together. So please get your beverage of choice. I like delicious Peet's coffee. You may enjoy something else, maybe tea, maybe water, hopefully not a soda or a diet soda, but if you do, no judgments. Also, even though it is the afternoon, most people in the world abstain from alcohol until after the workday is over. But maybe your job requires you to drink alcohol in order for you to stay. So maybe that's true. And if not, I will not judge you. Okay, so get that drink ready. Here we go. The simultaneous sip. That coffee goodness. And if you find yourself wondering, I wonder what Kent has in his coffee. Well, I'll tell you. I like to get a cafe Americano with a little bit of room for cream, and then I put a little bit of honey in it to sweeten it. So now you know the Ken Heckenlively coffee order. All right, so I was thinking about why I have been with the same lovely woman for 33 years. We were sitting out having coffee this morning and just talking over some things. And I thought that there was one specific character trait which just keeps our relationship wonderful. When I met my lovely wife 33 years ago, she was working as a speech therapist, but she also had a lot of outside interests. What was she doing? She was taking a Spanish class. She was taking a financial planning class. She was also training to get certified for scuba diving. Now, yes, she was absolutely lovely and remains so to this day. But I encourage you that the person that you are will have a big impact on how attractive you are to your partner. If you are somebody who is waiting for that other person to complete you, you're going to be waiting a long time. Because I know for me, I know what I want to do and what I'm interested in. And I think that makes me an interesting person. Same thing the other way. If you are going to have an interesting relationship, you should make sure you are an interesting person. My wife continues to do that. I am amazed how over the years she continues to engage in self-improvement projects. So when she retired from being a speech therapist, I said, honey, what are you going to do to give yourself that zip every day? And she said, I've been taking yoga for a couple years, and I really think I should become a yoga instructor. Now, you should know, I have never taken a single yoga class in my life. Will I ever take a single yoga class in my life? Probably not. But the fact that my wife finds it interesting just makes her so much happier and makes our relationship so much easier because each of us do those things which make us happy individually. And then it's so much easier to be happy when you interact with another human being. So what did she do? She took the hardest type of yoga, which, as I understand it, is called Bikram yoga. which requires a 90-minute monologue that you memorize, which she did fabulously. And then your yoga class takes place in a very heated and humid room. Yes, my wife likes to do the extreme things. That also explains why she has run several marathons in her life. And maybe that explains why she hopefully continues to enjoy being married to me, because I'm kind of a zealot too, as you can see from the number of books that I have written. Yes, the key to life is to do hard things. When you do hard things, it makes it, and you eventually achieve them, it just brings a great deal of satisfaction and joy to the individual, and you can be so much more of a better person to all those in your life. So, my advice to young men and women looking for fulfilling relationships, or individuals of any age, is make sure you're an interesting person, and then that's something you bring to the relationship. And either you meet up with somebody who is also individually satisfied in and of themselves, or they take what you have done as inspiration to pursue their own interests. So that's my relationship advice for today. But here's why you really came today, because you saw that in the episode, I review the new movie Young Washington by Angel Studios. Angel Studios is set up specifically to create family centered Christian entertainment, and I've gone to see a number of their films. I have enjoyed their films, although I have to say that they have generally not been up to Hollywood quality standards. Yeah, I know. You're going to say, wow, Hollywood sucks. Yeah, I got that. But technically, Hollywood films are extremely technically proficient. And Angel Studios seems to have had some problems in the past. Well, that problem is completely gone. Young Washington is a technically competent and very compelling film. I mean, in some of the other Angel Studios productions that I've seen, there will be a couple scenes where I go, oh God, they just didn't have the money to do that shot right, did they? That doesn't happen in Young Washington. In fact, I would say that the visuals are beautiful and spectacular. They really show a love for young America as it was 20 years before the Revolution, when the Americans and the British were fighting side by side against the French and Indian, who were making excursions into the Ohio Valley. It is set up just beautifully. It's a visually wonderful film. The acting is all superb. It is a movie that can compete with Hollywood. Okay, I will stand by that. It is a wonderful film. But as I was watching it, there was something deeper that I think the film does exceptionally well, which is an examination of the American character, and specifically of the heroic journey. And I think that there's something unique about the American character, which if I can put it into a few words, would be something like this: Americans are an irrational people. Okay? I want you to sit on that idea. Americans are irrational people. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that rational people look at the situation, figure out their odds of success, and then if their odds of success are not good, they don't do anything. They sit home, tend their garden, and don't get engaged in the world. But the American character is different. We are an irrational people. The only people who change the world, however, are irrational people. Therefore, the only people who have a chance at changing anything are going to be irrational. And Young Washington is a movie which perfectly encapsulates that idea. So let me kind of walk through a couple parts of Young Washington, and hopefully you'll understand why I say the American character is essentially irrational, but all progress depends on irrational people. So the world which is set up in Young Washington is one in which the system is rigged against Americans, against the colonists. The English exist as overlords. Okay, so the Washington family has some problems. The patriarch dies, but it appears that the patriarch is on a second marriage. George has an older brother who has a commission in the English army, but again, he's a colonial. Okay, so even though there's a great deal of prejudice against the colonials, against the Americans, George Washington wants to join their army. He wants to help them out. There is an English lord who has a lot of property in the Ohio Valley, which needs to be surveyed. It's dangerous to go out on the frontier, but George Washington volunteers to go out and survey this land. So that's something that he's doing, and he is encouraged not to do this by some of his family members because he is seeking to be looked upon as an equal by the British. And several people tell him that no, even if you do all these great things for the British, they will never respect you. But George continues anyway. The first irrational act of his life. Second, rational people will ask whether they're prepared for what they're about to do. And if they don't feel properly prepared, will choose not to do it. Now, there can be many variations of this. You can go and get some extra training and everything, but there might be a situation in which there isn't time to get properly prepared. So it's probably important for you to know that you're not properly prepared, and you have to make the decision what you will do. If you stay home and simply tend to your crops, then you will never live a life of adventure. What Washington happens when he goes out and surveys is he finds out that the French have built a fort in the Ohio Valley in violation of English claims of ownership. So when he returns and he reports this to the British, they then put him in charge or offer him command of a small group of individuals to go back out to the Ohio Valley and deliver a message to the French commander there that they should abandon those lands. This is something which is foolish of him to do. It is clear that he is unqualified to lead men, but that's the opportunity that's presented to him. There is no chance to do something different. So it's a binary choice, and he makes the choice, which is irrational, which is towards action, which is something I always encourage people to do, which is take action, whatever that might be. It might even be a relatively small action, but you need to take action. So he marches out there with this group. They meet up with some Native Americans, figure out that some Native Americans are against the French because the French have engaged in atrocities against some of the Native Americans there. And the French commander understandably says, "Oh, thanks for the message. We ain't going anywhere." So Washington and his men march back, and then they tell the British, "Yeah, the French aren't going to leave." And so then the British say, "Oh, okay, Washington, go and lead these men. You're going to tell the French they have to leave. And if you don't, you must kill them." So Washington is unprepared. But what does he do? Yes, he goes in and he does it. And, one of the things to realize when you take action is that sometimes unexpected opportunities are going to come. So it was very clear that the French outnumbered the English group that was sent into the Ohio Valley. But fortunately, in the first engagement, they encounter a small reconnaissance party, a small surveying party of the French, which includes the French commander, and Washington and his men overcome them. But later, they are driven out by the French. So Washington returns kind of in shame with the fact that his group, which was poorly prepared, was defeated. And this might be the end, right? And there's a significant portion of the time which is spent with Washington back at home, licking his wounds. He has resigned his commission. But the fact that the French have attacked a bunch of colonials has drawn the attention of the English army, who will then start putting British troops on the line. They think that, oh, it's going to be very simple for us to attack the French, to beat the French back, because after all, we are British. We're so much better than the French. And what Washington does at this time is indicative of that irrational American spirit, which is, he says, look, I know the British troops are better than our colonial troops, but you don't understand what it's like fighting in the New World. You don't know what kind of fighting happens out here. And so the British kind of make fun of him, but they eventually accept him as an aide. And the British troops, along with Washington, march off to this to the French fort. What happens is that there is a pitched battle, and it looks like it's going to be a massacre for the English forces. What happens is that Washington, and I guess this is historically accurate, was actually at the time near death and roused himself from his sick bed as the battle is going, and rallies the troops and has them fight the way that he knows battles should be fought in the New World. As a result, this certain massacre is transformed not quite into a victory, but not quite into the disaster that it could have been. And so the movie ends with Washington back with the British in British headquarters. They have become aware of his bravery, and Washington has become something of a celebrity. He's also the kind of person who writes extremely well. So his dispatches are full of romantic language about the frontier, something that seems to have been well received in London, where the funds need to come from. And you can just see that he is set on a course for greatness. And, it just made me think about the American character. And, I write books about our current political process. And, sometimes I get very depressed about what's going on. I think that's the way a lot of people feel. They feel that the system is rigged. I don't know how to fight this system. The system seems to want me to fail. And all of those things are true. But I think that each one of us has to say, well, I understand all that's true, but I must begin anyway. However, it is that you feel that you can fight, even if you feel you are outmatched. It is your duty, not just as an American, but as somebody who's been given life by God, to engage in this fight. And there was also something wonderful in the Washington movie, which is when this final battle starts. And I have to say, the battle scenes, beautifully shot, wonderful. Nobody has any reason to be embarrassed that this is an Angel Studios production and they're recreating battles which took place on the American frontier as 20 years before the American Revolution. So it's going to look different than pretty much every other American battle scene you've seen. But God, they do a wonderful job. But there's a moment as the battle is falling apart, which even these snooty British officers don't know what to do. And I say to you, as you think about the forces which may oppose the good sense of the American people, these people who are in charge also don't know exactly what they're facing. And so there's a moment where the snooty British officer has no idea what to do in the fight. And that's when Washington really has his moment, because since he's seen failure, he knows what to do next. And that's something that I encourage all of you to think about, which is what may seem like failure to you in one moment may be you're being given the information you need for a future victory. And so, kind of like on all levels, I have to say, young Washington really works great. At the end, there was a message from Kelsey Grammer, who plays the part in the story and has been a big supporter of American history being taught to our young people in a way that makes them proud while also acknowledging historical realities. And he says that the mission of the hope of the producers is that on America's 250th birthday, that young Washington will be #1 at the box office. Well, I'm hopeful that it can be #1 at the box office, but I'm predicting that young Washington will have a long run, not just in the theaters, because it is a good film, but I think it's going to have an excellent life after that. So if you want to do something great with your families this weekend, Young Washington is a great choice. There's also kind of a fun little love story in Young Washington. I guess there is some question about whether the woman they portray was married at that time, but he did have significant correspondence with this woman. And I have to say, there is something just so sweet about the kind of courtliness of the 18th century as it's portrayed in film and how men and women would talk to each other. It's sweet, it's lovable. Like a lot of things in life when you're young, you're not going to win, but you can distinguish yourself as a person of merit, and it sets you up for future success. And I just have to say, kind of like everything in this movie just worked for me. So if you want a great film to go and see on the 4th of July weekend, you can take your family, you can talk about it afterwards. It hits all the spots. So I want to really encourage you, go see Young Washington for the 4th of July. Okay, with all that being said, I wanted to take a little bit of time to read a little bit about the birthright citizenship decision that came down from the Supreme Court, because a lot of the conservative media is getting very upset about it. And I thought, I just don't want to go with the crowd. I want to take a little bit of time, let it sit. And so what I had done for show prep was I went to the SCOTUS blog, Supreme Court of the United States blog, and I looked at what they wrote about it. And I found it very interesting. And I have to say, I understand why the Supreme Court did what they did. I'm also going to say that I don't think it's the end of the issue, but I just want to present a little bit of context to people, because I think that that's why you listen to me. I'm generally conservative, but I like to be open-minded, and I like to listen to the other side, and I don't like to give knee-jerk reactions. So let me just read a little bit from the decision and point out some interesting facts that you may not know, and make suggestions for where we go from here. Because remember, the fight is never over until you stop. Okay, so the Supreme Court on Tuesday struck down President Donald Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship, the guarantee of citizenship to virtually everyone born in the United States. In a decision by Chief Justice John Roberts in Trump versus Barbara, the justices agreed with the challengers, as well as the lower courts around the country that have considered the issue, that Trump's order cannot be reconciled with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which confers citizenship on anyone, quote, born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Okay, so I thought, all right, here's sort of like my test for whether I'm being given good information by my sources. One of the tests that I do is whether there's been a difference of opinion in the lower courts or whether they've been unanimous. So when I read that all of the earlier courts had been unanimous against it, I said to myself, well, maybe I need to look a little bit deeper here. And then I came across this section in the SCOTUS blog. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court upheld the lower court's decisions. Roberts explained that under early English law, children who were born in Britain automatically became British subjects. Quote, this view crossed the Atlantic with the colonists and was adopted with little fanfare after the Revolution, Roberts observed. In 1868, the 14th Amendment was adopted to repudiate the Supreme Court's infamous 1857 ruling in Dred Scott versus Sanford, holding that a Black person whose ancestors were brought to this country and sold as enslaved persons was not entitled to any protection from the federal courts because he was not a U.S. citizen. And then the Supreme Court then reaffirmed that principle in 1898 in the case of Wong Kim Ark, who was born in San Francisco to parents of Chinese descent. When he returned to the United States from a visit to China in 1895, immigration officials would not allow him to enter the country on the ground that he was not a U.S. citizen. Quote, what the court held in Wong Kim Ark was simple, Roberts stressed. The Citizenship Clause incorporated the common law and granted citizenship to nearly all children born in the United States. Not surprisingly, then, in the 128 years, we have repeatedly understood the rule of that case, quote, to guarantee citizenship to all children born in the United States and subject to its power. So on historical grounds and what they call legal precedents, I have to say that I agree with the Supreme Court's decision. But is that the end of the issue? No, because those historical examples do not reflect modern realities. The modern reality is that countries such as China are engaging in significant birth tourism, where Chinese officials can go to United States locations, even places like the U.S. Protectorate of Guam, have their child, and that child can then go back to live in China under communist rule and will theoretically be eligible to run for president of the United States. The other thing that has happened is that there is an unprecedented uh, uh, run through or invasion of our southern border by individuals who are fleeing economic problems or are motivated by other desires. Okay, so this is something that has not existed in the past. If you think of the past and you think of things like revolutionary times and how difficult it was to travel from England to the United States or from China to the United States in the 1890s, well, you were pretty much stuck in America and subject to its jurisdiction. I think that's significantly different than today when you can board a plane and in 18 hours you can be on the other side of the world. So, on historical grounds, I think that the Supreme Court made a reasonable decision. However, I think that the decision does not take into account modern realities. As I understand it, one of the justices said that there are things that the legislature can do to uh, more closely reflect modern realities and put some limitations on this birth tourism or individuals who seek to enter the United States but do not seem to have much of an interest in being subject to its jurisdiction. So remember, the fight is never over until you give up. And I would encourage all conservatives and people who are interested about this problem of birth tourism and anchor babies to continue their efforts. I think that there is a way that we can solve these problems, and all is not lost, my dear friends. So, hopefully, I want you to go out and have a great 4th of July weekend. Maybe take in young Washington and maybe take a little bit of time to investigate some of the wonderful principles of this country that we all so dearly love. And I'm not telling you what side of the aisle you need to vote for, but I am telling you, you should be aware of your history. You should be aware of some of the really remarkable ideas that the United States has chosen to follow, and that we need to be eternally vigilant that we keep these freedoms that others have paid for so dearly. Thanks a lot and have a great day.